Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We've been having second reading for Monday, May 1st. Chair comments, the board has executive session for this meeting. Discuss litigation and personnel items. The next item we have on our agenda is public hearing. Conditional use, 91 Road in West Buffalo Avenue, 12 Brothers, Birchmont. Step up and introduce yourself.
Good evening. Dave Fox from Oakmeyer. We have the applicant, Mid-Atlantic LP. So my left is Brian Guerin, Senior Vice President with Toll Brothers. As we have two professional witnesses this evening. Jeff Madden, our professional engineer with ESC Consulting, and Justin, and I butchered that, Justin Barnett, also of ESC Consulting. May I have our witnesses sworn in?
We have a little further information to get passed before you do that, if you don't mind.
Not a problem.
All right. The applicant, Toll Brothers Mid-Atlantic LP, Company Inc., has filed an application for conditional use approval so as to be able to construct a 44-unit townhome community UC5 with three tax parcels 26-006-101-004, 26-006-101, and 26-006-101-03, those coming from the Gilmore report, which in the aggregate consists of 8.65 acres. The property in question is located within the C1 commercial zoning district, but the affected parcels were established as a J31 PCTM use via zoning hearing board decision dated May 17, 2018, and a conditional use adjudication dated August 6, 2018. The plan proposes approximately 1.77 acres of open space as well as other improvements. The application was dated March 6, 2023. Notice of the hearing was advertised in the Intelligencer on Tuesday, April 11, 2023, and again on Tuesday, April 18, 2023. The application, as well as the 8 exhibits attached to the application, as well as all reports and recommendations received from the township staff, planning committee, other professionals, is incorporated in the record. Those documents are as follows: the application agreement of sale, Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2 is the site plan, Exhibit 3, the architectural renderings, Exhibit 4, environmental impact statement, Exhibit 5, fiscal impact analysis, Exhibit 6, the traffic system inventory and analysis, Exhibit 7, the conditional use stormwater management narrative, Exhibit 8, stormwater management plans pre-development. As far as other documents incorporated, we have correspondence from Gilmore Associates Inc. dated April 19, 2023. We have a review from David Conroy dated April 19, 2023. We have a memorandum of action taken by the New Britain Township Planning Commission as meeting held on April 25, 2023. I would note the New Britain Township Planning Commission recommended at its meeting on April 25, 2023, approval with certain conditions. The exhibits that I would offer in the record are T1, which is the notice received from the Intelligencer that the ad in fact was placed. Exhibit T2 is the application from Toll Brothers together with the 8 exhibits. T3 is the letter from Gilmore Associates dated 4/19/23. T4 is the review from David Conroy dated April 19, 2023. T5 being the memorandum prepared by Ryan Gavin identifying the action taken by the New Britain Township Planning Commission on April 25, 2023. Now I'm going to ask if anyone in the audience would like to have party status. Party status means you want to ask questions of the witnesses. You want to make, not just for your public comment, you want to actually participate in the proceedings by asking questions and presenting your own experts if you so desire. Does anyone desire party status? Let the record reflect no one has requested party status. Mr. Fox, would you begin, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Garten, and if we preliminary get our witnesses sworn
May I
in.
have them all sworn if you choose?
And,
Point of order, we actually never voted to open the hearing. Don't we have to do that?
No.
No, okay, I thought we did. Okay,
Conducting it,
okay.
the newspaper was so notified. that you're-
Okay.
You did not object to the time limit.
Okay, gotcha. Just checking.
this is advertised only as a hearing, not a business.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
Now we're ready to have your witnesses. sworn.
Excellent. Brian Perrin, Senior Vice President of Toll Brothers, Jeff Madden, with ESC, and Justin Burnett, also with ESC.
Gentlemen, you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Then after God.
And for the stenographer's benefit, I'll provide you those exhibits at the end.
Thank you.
So, and I have an exhibit packet as well, which anticipated going through a full question and answer session. The only items that are different from some of the items that Mr. Garten read into the record, tab number 3 is the May 17 zoning hearing board decision granting dimensional relief to allow this entire assemblage to be developed.
Okay, so that would be exhibit A1.
If we can call this entire package exhibit A1, so tab 3 of exhibit A1.
So that would be what's in your submission as far as exhibit A1.
Site plans, architectural renderings, zoning hearing board decision, conditional use decision.
Now, let me ask you, how different are they than what I put into the record?
3 things are different.
All right, why don't you just identify the 3 different things? One is the
Zoning
decision
hearing board
from,
decision from May 17, 2018. And then also tab number 4 is the April 1st, 2019 conditional use decision. Approving a PCCM and limiting the development of this property to be part of a PCCM.
with the date of that.
April 1st, 2019. And we have an updated traffic system inventory and analysis responsive to the Gilmore and Associates letter of April 19, 2023, which is dated April 28th, 2023. And of course, if there's anything further that needs to be addressed, we'll handle that, assuming we get to land development.
Your package includes what I had mentioned before, plus these additional modifications.
Exactly.
Right.
If anyone, I didn't know if anyone had all this already. If you'd like it, I'm happy to.
Well, they have received, as I mentioned to you previously, they've received your application. They've also received the exhibits aside from the notice that I referenced. So you may provide another copy. But as I mentioned before, I don't think you need to go through your records and your witnesses, but you don't need to dwell on things that would be considered
We've
actually
actually,
basis.
sure.
Oh.
I know. I'll take them back at the end of the.
This collection is A1, correct? Mr. Fox, this collection is A1, correct?
One, yes, thank you, Jeff.
Give one to the stenographer. Would you mark it A1, please?
With apologies to the number of trees that have met their demise constructing our application. Thank you for having us here this evening. You've seen us a few times before. We've been working with the township, starting with the township staff, and several times the planning commission, even before you, trying to figure out what is the by right zoning for this remaining parcel in this PCCM. You heard me talk to Mr. Garten a bit. What you have in front of you includes a zoning hearing board decision which granted dimensional relief to reduce the size minimally of this assemblage, which includes the property you see in green, the Wawa property, and the Creamery Tire parcel. So that all of these 3 properties essentially have to be developed now as a PCCM because of the conditional use decision issued on April 1st, 2019. limiting the future development of this property to part of a PCCM. So looking at what a PCCM can be, looking through the proposed or permitted uses under section 27-305 J31B. Toll Brothers is in the business of developing residential homes. Looking at the options available there, it's either B5 single family attached or B6 multifamily. We started thinking that this property could hold 62 to 66 units. Working through several reviews of a sketch plan, that brought us down to 44 units. The 44 unit B5 plan is what you see before you this evening. I will note that that has additional open space than is otherwise required, and we'll talk through that in testimony. So to give you an idea that could there be a way to potentially squeeze a unit or two more? Maybe, but I think that the barometer that there's some additional open space than the minimum required by your ordinance is a good gauge that this is probably about the limit of what should be developed on this property. And it's our position that when looking at the surrounding area, how this area has been developed, this is a natural transition from intensive commercial use, moderately intense residential use to single family home development. And when considered against any of the other uses that are reasonable or feasible within the PCCM, this is one of the least impactful or at least harmful to the surrounding community, and fits in nicely and is able to meet the intention of the PCCM, providing connectivity between residential and commercial uses. And I think it's done in such a way that, as we'll show you tonight, hopefully makes sense, so we can ask for your approval. So we are asking for a couple adjustments that are permitted within the conditional use process. And those are we're asking for 2 community identification signs on the development, one along the access road A, and Gus, you mind pointing out? So essentially the 2 community entrances, because this property doesn't have 500 feet of street frontage, even along County Line Road, we're limited to 1 entrance sign per 500 feet. So we'd like to have 2 entrance signs, so folks know whether they're exiting the Wawa parcel or coming in to our community, where they're going, to kind of give the residential homes a sense of place. You won't see them at all other than within the PCCM development itself. Secondly, we're asking for a minor adjustment from the height of the townhouses. 35 feet is your maximum permitted height. You see the renderings on the left are consistent with the renderings that were in the conditional use package as application package, as well as tab 2 of exhibit A1. The way height is defined, it's 35 feet, I believe, to the midspan of the truss. Now, we could meet the 35-foot height variance, but it's a lower pitched roof and it takes away from the architectural aesthetics. Just doesn't look, and Brian, it doesn't look as consistent with the Toll Brothers brand of quality and what the image is of a high quality, aesthetically pleasing community. So what we're asking the board to do is give us a 2-foot height adjustment, but we're increasing the density of the landscape buffer, and can talk about how that can be mitigated against folks on area Ave to the extent that additional 2 feet would be problematic. And third, we are asking for the ability to disturb 4,300 square feet within the existing conservation easement. This is the area, Justin, can I trouble you again? To provide the connectivity from the Wawa parcel to our proposed development, the utility and access easement goes through an existing conservation easement. So this is permitted to be done with the Board of Supervisors approval. And we're offering and would be glad to do replacement trees that's on our property, or if we had to do them elsewhere, but we'd be happy to plant them here because they were here. It makes sense to keep them in this general vicinity. We're happy to do that as well. But otherwise, our conditional use request is will comply with everything in the Gilmore Associates letter. We're compliant with in all other respects with the requirements of a PCCM within the New Britain Township zoning ordinance. And are there any questions of me before I go through some witness question and answer direct examination?
Why don't you start with your first witness?
Brian, do you mind briefly giving your professional background and
About identifying yourself again, because you were all sworn together, so.
name, professional background for the board?
Yeah, my name is Brian Fearon. I'm with Toll Brothers.
About spelling your last name for the stenographer, if you would.
I have,
You have a card, right?
thank you.
I've been with, background, I've been with Toll Brothers for almost 19 years. In all phases of development, operations, acquisitions and approvals. And done all of these in Pennsylvania and Delaware as well.
And you heard me give a summary of the application history of this property. Everything I said was true, correct, to the best of your knowledge, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And a particular point of working down from 60-some units to the 44 we're proposing, correct?
Yeah, I think our initial discussions probably over a year ago, and took the feedback from consultants, the board, planning commission, and kind of landed on our 44 lot plan that you see here tonight.
And you've heard me talk about the requirements of a PCCM, but particularly with this layout and the proposed connectivity, that gives us a walkable, multiple opportunities for connectivity to Wawa immediately with the commercial property, correct?
That is correct.
And that's something that is important for Toll Brothers to provide a sense of place, but also a way for folks to access the surrounding area, whether by car, walking, et cetera. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that was one of the key things with this piece of property is just the proximity to local conveniences. You can walk there if you want, if not, it's a 2-minute, drive across Butler. So that's really kind of one of the key points of this community for us.
And just ask you to look at the architectural renderings. This is generally describe how those were selected, and those are consistent with the requirements of the Butler Avenue Corridor Overlay District. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's a product that we've used in many municipalities throughout Pennsylvania. It's roughly 1,900 to 2,000 square feet. 3-story townhome, no more than 3 bedrooms in them. And I think we had a rendering in front of the board many months ago, and with feedback kind of tweaked the elevations to make it unique to this property. And that's what we proposed that we would build here.
And you're looking at stone roof details above the garage, bay windows, multiple turn gables, and a fair amount of architectural detail, correct?
That is correct.
And you heard me explain the need for the 2-foot adjustment in height. I don't know exactly what the pitch of that roof is, but a shallower pitch roof just doesn't have the same look or feel. Is that correct?
That is correct. I mean, that's typically, that one right there is about a 7-pitch roof, and we don't usually typically go below 7. It just makes the gables and everything look a little odd, and it makes the roof look very flat when you drop it down. We would have to drop it to what they call 5-pitch or 2 feet below. And it's just aesthetically, we try to stay away from that. It just doesn't look right from pulling back. When you're right in front of them, maybe you don't see it, but if you're pulled back a little bit from that perspective, they would look a lot flatter, almost like an old flat roof, but really shallow.
And generally, a flatter pitch roof is a higher intensity level of maintenance and upkeep when there are seasonal changes and whatnot, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And this would be an HOA managed community, so the roofs presumably would be part of the maintenance for the HOA, correct?
That is correct.
And in all respects, is your understanding this, other than the 3 requests for relief for signage at the entrances, disturbance of the conservation easement, and the height of the townhomes, this application complies with the Gilmore letter and the other requirements of the PCCM. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great, thank you. I have no further
I have a
questions.
question. I recall reading somewhere that you focused your parking on 3 bedrooms. And whether you'd be amenable to having a deed restriction saying no more than 3 bedrooms, because sometimes people turn garages into bedrooms. You amenable to that restriction?
Yeah, we can do it there, Nate and I spoke about this, or in the HOA documents, which is maybe something that keeps.
So you're agreeable to the concept?
Absolutely.
Greg, do you have any questions?
Yes, you referenced in a review letter, item A1 regarding the community identification signs. You're asking the board, which they have the power to do so as part of this use, to provide 2 identification signs. Are you requesting any relief on the size of those signs? Or is it just having 2 per the development? You won't meet the ordinance requirements for these height dimensional criteria of those signs?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any board questions at this moment? I see none.
Next, I'd like to call Jeff Madden.
Is it Madden?
Madden.
EN.
Yep, yes, ma'am. Yeah, good evening. Please state your name and professional qualifications for the board.
Sure, Jeffrey Madden, last name Madden. I'm a regional director of engineering for ESE Consultants. I have PEs in multiple states, and I've had been practicing for 24+ years in civil engineering.
And you admitted to, you have a professional license in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I did.
And where'd you go to college?
Drexel University.
I think we can agree, unless we disagree, that you're an expert in civil engineering.
Great. And Jeff, your company, ESE Consulting, prepared the plans before the board seating, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you reviewed the New Britain Township zoning ordinance, specifically the requirements of a PCCM and the preparation of those plans, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you heard me discuss 3 points of relief or alteration from the PCCM requirements. Other than those 3, are there any areas where this development does not comply with the requirements of the PCCM?
No, there's not.
Okay, so just you may have heard me say that this plan provides more open space than is required, and I have a note that 0.69 acres would be required, but we're providing 1.74 acres. Is that correct? Is that generally a fair barometer of a community that is not going above and beyond as far as density from a civil engineering perspective?
Yes.
In other words, if we were right up against that 0.69 acres, that's a good indicator that there's probably a little room to shave or go down a little bit.
Correct.
And now looking at the layout of this property, is it just talk through some general circulation patterns or how folks may access the community?
Sure. There's an existing road off of County Line Road that would be the rear entrance to the
You have one of
Wawa.
those fancy,
My battery wore out, unfortunately.
Can we call on Justin for
all right, you're gonna have your Vanna White do it then.
Road A, as we have specified, would load off of that existing access road. And would all the 44 dwelling units would take access off of Road A. And there's also a Road B connection to the side of Wawa to create a circular loop for access to the Wawa parcel and to ultimately get out to West Butler Avenue.
And we have 2-car garages, correct? As well as parking in the driveway.
Correct.
And we're proposing some on-street parking, or is it purely in the please, purely on driveway, or do we have an area of on-street parking on this
Right now on Road A, we have 14 spaces specified.
Great, and that's consistent with the New Britain Township zoning ordinance, we meet all the parking requirements, is that correct?
That's correct.
And as far as, talk about.
While you're speaking about his next question, I'll ask one. You mentioned you have a certain number of spaces on the street. I think you mentioned 14.
Yep.
Is your intention to restrict on-street parking beyond that 14 spaces?
Something that would definitely be worked out during the land development phase. But at this time, with the 28-foot wide drive, the 28-foot wide road, I would assume that would be the case. Yes.
So that's shown for zoning compliance, and we come in for land development, we can work out whether there needs to be any further restrictions. With the planned community, there'll be a declaration plat that provides what parking spaces can and cannot be used for, and then that can be reviewed by the township solicitor and township engineer to their satisfaction,
And firemen.
and fire marshal.
Because when you have a lot of on-street parking, it creates safety issues for kids and a lot of other issues. So
You heard me ask about requesting relief from the 35-foot height restriction at 37 feet. I'm gonna ask Justin to talk about the specifics of the buffer, but we're proposing a wider buffer than is otherwise required, right? Can you talk through how that's shown on the plan and what that may mean for mitigating of the effect of any increase in height of the townhouses?
Sure, against the buffering against other residential areas. There is a 20-foot buffer required. We're showing 45 45-foot wide buffer and a 75-foot wide setback to the nearest home. Back of the home. On the right side of the property, there is a residential parcel and an existing or proposed commercial use. And we have a 25-foot wide minimum buffer necessary for township ordinance. We again show at least a 45-foot wide buffer from the property line.
And then we're not proposing any tree removal or replacement other than from the area in conservation easement, correct?
That's correct.
And just from a civil engineering design perspective, this is a sound plan with principles of civil engineering and design.
Yes, we've preliminarily designed stormwater management facilities to handle with possible development improvements. And will be further discussed during the land development process.
We've done enough of the homework from reviewing the saldo and what the site can hold that don't anticipate modification during the saldo process.
Do not.
And in your expert opinion, will the development of this property in any way substantially injure or detract from the use of any neighboring properties?
No.
And again, at the risk of being repetitive, to your knowledge, the plan as shown and as submitted with the conditional use application meets all the requirements other than those three areas I stated earlier in the Britain Township zoning word specifically as with regard to a PCTM.
That's correct.
And have all of your opinions tonight been given in your capacity as an expert in the field of civil engineering?
Yes, they have.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Brown?
I have a few, thank you. We noted in our review letter, April 19th, 2023, which at planning commission, I don't believe you were there.
I was not.
Okay, Mr. Fox stated that all the conditions that we brought up in our letter, or all the review comments where it will comply. I'm not going to go through every single one, but I assume that is still in effect, Mr. Fox. Specifically, Mr. Madden, we note that the plan is in conformance or consistent with the comprehensive plan. However, I do not see any park and recreation land or facilities proposed. How are you going to be addressing that? The ordinance provides a couple different options.
I believe that would be under discussions with the township during the land development stage.
So if you're not proposing, there is a requirement for a fee in lieu of. And just for a record, there are no recreation facilities proposed within this site.
So one of the planning commission's recommendation was to add some benches and trees, which we've agreed to do, and we'll talk through their location and placement during the land development process.
And I would attach it more to the amenities or the overlay, as far as actual active
Sure.
recreation land. There's not sure fee in lieu of, and I believe your intention was to do that.
And to be clear, we're not looking for any relief from the $3,000 per unit fee in lieu of. And I'll ask, Mr. Theron to confirm my client's consent. So we have
So
that.
you'll be taking that avenue, which is outlined in the zoning ordinance already, that is an option by the applicant.
Yep.
I know you did not go through the entire stormwater. This is preliminary initial use, but can you show for the residents and also for the board the two proposed on-site detention facilities? I believe there's two.
Yes, there's proposed 2 stormwater facilities on the site, which will capture and treat all the stormwater and be treated through these stormwater facilities and ultimately discharge into the existing pond or existing area adjacent to the access road.
And while you're standing, that was kind of the next part, then all that runoff will be discharged down towards the existing facility and also then out the County Line Road. Will there be any discharge to the neighbors? Any discharge to the back there? Everything will be collected in your site and go out the County Line Road.
Yes, there is some existing flow that goes in the, let's get what, I'll call it the northerly direction. That will be reduced to the township ordinance requirements.
And that was my next question. So you'll be reducing any flow that goes off your site where it's undetained will be less than what's leaving the site currently. Or whatever is leaving now will be less than after development.
That's correct.
There'll be no increase in stormwater from that point.
Correct.
Have you, I guess actually you have a traffic.
We submitted a responsive traffic system inventory and analysis.
That's your next witness, I assume?
We did not have our traffic engineer attend this evening, just submitted the report.
Okay.
And everything is a will comply.
That then either one of you can answer. Have you submitted anything official yet to PennDOT? Any plans? Don't believe you have.
No.
Okay, so any conditions tonight or any approval tonight or I guess in a future meeting, you'll be subject to anything from PennDOT, and the township reserve the right to make any modifications once we see what PennDOT has to say. We haven't had a chance to see what PennDOT can come back.
No, for sure. And in anticipation of just knowing what the traffic situation is at these intersections, we only are able to get access via the Wawa parcel and also to the County Line Road, which is a shared access. So
I don't anticipate significant changes.
No.
For PennDOT review, but you're amenable during the land development stage that any changes or any requirements PennDOT puts in there, we have the right to also provide feedback on.
Correct. That's, I'd also offer as well, given that there's not a one place or anticipated one thing that this PennDOT could require or that can be done, we're really infill on finishing out an existing development and using existing access ways. So we would offer a fee in lieu of equivalent to the park and rec impact fee that the township, you have a better ability to deploy funds than we would if there's a need or something that's off-site from our that may have anything to do with this or not. But we would offer a $3,000 matching fee in lieu of for traffic in the anticipation that there are maybe things that have to be addressed, but may not be directly caused by our project, but we want to be a good part of any solution.
I appreciate that. That wasn't my next question. Went down my list. Thank you both. That was something we discussed previously at Planning Commission. So this application does not propose any off-site improvements, and you're offering up a $3,000 per unit traffic improvement. Thank you. Are you willing to provide any? There is, I don't think it was discussed, but Road B, where it comes from Wawa site, it stops around Unit 27. you've agreed to provide an access easement to the adjoining property, which is the outside storage unit place. The applicant has agreed to provide, if we could ever extend that, to the next property. We're
Yeah.
able to that.
We'd leave that on the record plan, and if there needs to be a recorded easement as well, we're happy to work with.
Would that be the same for any trail extension? I know there was some trails proposed, some residents were concerned with those. They were removed through the sketch plans for the land development process. Are you still, is the applicant still amenable to any type of trail connection if we can work that out with the neighbors?
Yeah. Yes.
This is the last kind of question I have for either one of you. There is identified in our letter, there is some encroachment of the patios within the 75-foot buffer setback as part of the Butler Avenue corridor overlay district. Will you be revising or amending your application at land development to comply with that?
Yes.
That's all I have.
Any board questions?
Referring to Gilmore's letter, when you were talking about the parking on the road, they do suggest in K that you remove one of the parking spots in front of the cluster mailbox. How does that change what you may be able to provide on the street?
We would just have to find another location to put that one part additional parking space.
Any other questions? Not,
One more very brief.
okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Business number. Justin, can you please state your full name and professional qualifications for the board?
Yes, good evening. My name is Justin Barnett. I'm a registered landscape architect in the state of Pennsylvania. I hold a bachelor's of science degree from Temple University School of Environmental Design. I've worked at ESC Consultants for 12 plus years, working in land planning and landscape architecture.
We'll accept you as an expert, as a landscape architect.
Thank you. So Justin, really just want to ask you to summarize the landscaping that we're proposing and particularly highlight the areas where we are doing more than the minimum that the ordinance requires. Specifically, that's the buffer area to the surrounding uses.
Sure. So graphically, on the plan, the rendered plan, we're looking at, we're showing how the site would lay out with proposed landscaping and buffer areas that are required by code. During land development is where we kind of drill down onto specific plant species, quantities, locations. I think as it relates to this application and this hearing tonight, really the most sensitive area, in my opinion, is the adjacent boundary to the existing residential homes off of Berry Avenue. For code, we would utilize option E of section 27-2802 of the township ordinance. The buffer width would be 45 feet. The plant material in that buffer would be a mixture of shade trees, flowering trees, evergreen trees, and shrubs. For code, we would be required to provide 17 of each of those specific trees, but I think in light of the consideration for the requested building height adjustment, we'd be willing to probably triple that number at least. It's in Toll Brothers' best interest to.
What's that calculation?
So
Triple what?
the 17 of each type of tree. So really you're going from 53 trees required along the Berry Avenue frontage to 159, and then tripling the number of shrubs, which is 57 is required by code. And that'd be 170 plus shrubs.
And that entail helps to mitigate any additional height of the townhomes, as well as just general, a more dense buffer between residential communities.
Correct.
Are you married to the blend of trees between flowering and deciduous and evergreen?
No, the township ordinance offers multiple options. We can either do full evergreens. I think there's 5 different options in the ordinance.
There was some sentiment I think I reviewed that said that maybe it's preferable to have more evergreens.
And we're happy to work through that with the township. And you reviewed the landscaping requirements, the PCCM and specifically a B5 single family attached home.
Yes.
Is there anywhere that we don't either meet or exceed the ordinance requirements?
No.
And in your just looking at that plan as a professional landscape architect, is that at least a sufficient amount of landscaping to make an impact or lessen the impact between this use and any adjacent property owners?
Yes, absolutely.
And have all your opinions been given in your expert capacity this evening?
Yes.
Thank you, Justin. This board, any questions, Justin?
Any board questions? Cynthia does.
Yes, talking about plantings, would you consider plantings in the stormwater as well to help with that?
Yeah, we usually, and this would be drilled down in land development.
Yeah.
Based on what is required and permitted by township ordinance within the basins, and then actually how the basins are constructed. A typical basin, we usually have a seed, like a seed mix that is, will flourish within a wet bottom basin. And then we usually have a different seed mix that is on the side slopes, and then we'll plant around the top of the basin where appropriate.
There's grass seed.
Excuse me.
Are you speaking of grass seed?
Yeah, it's more than just grasses. It's a wetland mix or a bioretention mix. These are seed mixes that are specifically designed for stormwater management basins.
Not turnips.
No, it's,
Sweet grass. and-
yeah, much more wetland appropriate varieties.
So a follow-up to that question. In the homeowners association, the way it's set up, will they be deemed, or will they have to look after the stormwater basin if you're going to do something like that with the native grasses? Are they now? I don't know if this is. the right question.
It's perfectly fine. So this will be what's called a planned community. So a planned community association will be a set, and tell me to stop at any point if I'm telling you anything you already know. But the planned community association documents will get recorded against the property. Most of the time, the township solicitor and engineer want to review those to make sure they're to their satisfaction, that they're both consistent, assuming it's a conditional use approval with this approval, as well as any land development approvals. So those will place obligations on the homeowners association to follow a maintenance schedule, which is in part within the township ordinances, as well as DEP has some requirements and regulations depending upon what type of stormwater management feature and what the requirements are. In addition to that, we'll have, I'm sure Jeff will ask us to report a stormwater management operations and maintenance agreement, which will provide another recorded document against the property, which will be referenced in the planning community declaration. But that will also have maintenance requirements, typically a schedule of when it has to be inspected, how long after a rain event it has to be inspected, what maintenance has to be done. And if we don't do it, the township can come and do it and charge us. So does that answer the question? Sorry, that's following, but so that's generally what to be expected here. And Brian, that's consistent with Toll Brothers practice in any of their plant communities in Pennsylvania. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
I just have a comment about the trees. I'm not sure where the evergreen comment came from.
I read it in one of the review letters, or one of them said, you may want to consider more evergreens and less of the other trees because of the neighborhood being so to the rear of the properties.
Okay.
But it's going to be up to the,
I thought that was coming from the planning. Okay, I wasn't sure if I used that. But I think our engineer is aware of what we. Thank you.
anything else, Mr. Fox?
No, I have a brief summation, but
Well, why don't we wait for public comment?
Yeah, actually, this is directed to Mr. Fox or Mr. Therian. They didn't really touch on utilities too much. I know this is like the initial use, but I wanted to just briefly discuss where your connection is to for water and sewer. Have you contacted the sewer authority yet for capacity? I don't know if you've made any of those preliminary discussions yet.
Yeah, so we have will serves from all utility companies, water. There's an existing water line on the edge of Wild West property.
Okay.
That'll tie into there. Sanitary, correct me if I'm wrong. It's coming out here. This is gonna be obviously natural gas. Pico Utilities, and then Verizon will have access there as well.
Okay, thank you. Then a follow-up question, for either one of you. I think maybe everybody doesn't know, but this will be a private community, but also with a private road, so the township is not taking ownership of this road. It will be private under the Planned Community Association. However, you are making a connection to Wawa through an existing easement. You're also do you own the property or making a connection out to County Line Road? Does your property actually go out to County Line Road? Part of this application?
Yeah, the easement that is the Wawa access is actually on this property.
They have an easement on your property.
So that our access, that would be part of our property here. We have been, I don't know if we were going there next, we've already had a discussion with Wawa. There's an agreement and concept to have a sidewalk that goes out to the Butler intersection. We just have to work out details with Wawa, but they're in favor of it, so.
Does any part of approval, you need to acquire the access easement from Wawa? The access out to County Line Road is already on your property, which I wasn't sure about.
And right, and we're also showing some, I'll call cleanup modifications to the Creamery Tire property. Are those consistent with what Toll Brothers plans to do if approval's granted?
Yeah, we had discussions about this over the last year, just trying to, improve that frontage right there as you come in. So I think we can work it out and land it on, but the idea is, to add like a little island, extend something here, extend this island a little bit and kind of close down that opening that runs to the tire place, and then with some real landscaping in those islands, and then continue a sidewalk through here. So it's just a better presentation, I think, from our vantage point as you come in.
That's something you have already had discussion at Planning Commission with my office as well. Right now, it's a sea of parking, sea of pavement. So to better define that access, it was not taken care of with Wawa, but you've been in contact with that property owner. And that will be another offsite kind of approval agreement needed to clean up that small corridor there.
Correct.
That's all I have.
Is there any public comment about the application and the hearing? You want to come, please?
Hi, applicant.
Just as long as you can get close enough, we can all hear you. And keep it right there, perfect.
Bridget, what did you say your last name was?
KUNAKORN. Just two questions, one regarding maybe directed towards the Board Planning Commission and or to your landscape architect. Are the species of the trees and shrubs going to be native species?
Yes, typically we do push towards that way. We also have to follow certain ordinance requirements as well as
All right, so we will be avoiding any invasive species.
Correct, yeah, we're
considered by the.
correct.
And then Keith, you made a kind of a joke at the beginning about all the trees that were killed to print the materials, but sure. No, it's okay. Yeah, print things. But there is in a more serious note, there is 4,300 square feet of protected woodlands, which are proposed to be disturbed in this variation. And that's for the vehicular and pedestrian access to all of the road B. So while you are proposing to do more than the minimum, I think that we should be striving to do the maximum. The website says that we believe, Toll Brothers, we believe in that sustainability and preservation of natural environment are important to building exceptional homes and communities. So to that, I would question whether or not you would propose to replace and or purchase another allotment in the amount that.
I'm going to suggest that you keep active when we get to the land development subdivision process.
I will be.
That'll be a time when we can do our best to enhance the tree replacement for you and the neighbors and everybody else that's involved.
They have agreed to do, I raised that issue in our letter.
Okay.
They did agree to replacement of trees.
But replacement trees are a little bit different than mature growth, old growth species. Because they take time to grow and to absorb and.
What's your question to them then?
She's saying,
Would you
would
be able
they,
to purchase a lot of mature growths of equivalent size? Is that possible?
they consider
Would they
enhancing
consider
that?
As a commitment towards our community and preservation.
That's up to the applicant to agree to,
Yes,
but I have
I'm
never
just
had that
proposing.
in this township where we replaced with mature trees, so.
No, they
No.
can purchase a lot of that is already existing
Oh,
of woodland, which is already mature.
I'm sorry. Do you have it? You have a place you're talking about, or the ordinance says they can plant, it's all about replanting, not.
Yes,
purchasing.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but.
It's a concept we need to consider.
It's just something I'm throwing out there for either this development and future developments to consider.
Just to set the record straight, they did not propose the access even to Wawa. That was something requested by the Township Planning Commission,
Okay.
I believe, and this board. So they do not have to connect to Wawa. As indicated in my letter, that the township requested multiple times for them to provide a safe access.
Okay.
And Wawa did agree to allow that out. So the only way through that was through that.
Right, so just as a resident, I would prefer to see in the future more considerate options.
We'll address that topic when we get to the land development process.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so you other comments, Mr. Fox, you want to make a brief closing before I make a couple comments?
Sure, and thank
No, you don't need to repeat what you did in your opening. So
you.
I think we already heard your closing with your opening, but please have at it.
But thank you again for having us. You've heard testimony consistent with all the requirements for a B5 townhouse use and single family attached use within this PCCM. The property is limited, being developed as a PCCM. And I think as Mr. Garten would agree, Pennsylvania case law that where the requirements of a conditional use are met, it's required to be granted subject to reasonable conditions. I think we've proposed some reasonable conditions and we anticipate probably the township requesting a few more. But we do thank you for working with us at this point, and we're hopeful that we can obtain a conditional use approval and come back for land development. And that's all our exhibits be moved into the record.
They received. You have 2 weeks from tonight to submit to me for submittal to the board a proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law. Time frame work for you?
Yep.
All right, keeping with Mr. Hood's comments, hearing is closed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment?
I just have a question. If the 3-bedroom unit that was referred to earlier is in the HOA agreement versus the deed restriction,
We will be discussing that at land development. I think that the deed restriction is more enforceable. I think it will probably appear in both locations.
so because my understanding is that a homeowners association can change requirements later if the residents all agree to vote a change.
There's a process for that, yes, so
Thank you.
we understand, and that's a very important issue.
Anybody else? The announcements.
Just one. Go Sixers.
Next meeting of the Board of Supervisors meeting will take place on Monday, May 16th at 7 p.m. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the website within 48 hours. And the meeting dates will also be shown on our website. Any other things? Is there a motion to adjourn? For a second.
Our photo, the township property over there.